Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module.
Hello and welcome to Module 28, Creating an Annual Company Meeting Schedule. So Rick, this is something that I think takes this rhythms and rituals to a new level and bakes it into the company in a way that gets you to do things that aren't kind of spontaneous, but scheduled in a way that drives a process forward and drives all your objectives forward, etc. And you had a good quote about this. What's the quote?
This quote is from Julius Irving. Being a professional is doing the things you love to do, even on the days you don't feel like doing them. And the reason why I've held this back for so many years, I've been practicing this annual meeting schedule for many years, going back into the 90s. And if you think about it, Pat, if you think about these huge companies that operate, they all started as one small company. And you've heard me talk about McDonald's. And the interesting thing about McDonald's is they can have a 16 or 18-year-old kid open the place in the morning, go through the scheduled and necessary accountabilities and processes and rituals, and that same kid could close it at night, and all the money goes where it needs to go, and everything works right. Well, that all happens because they've got all of this stuff baked in. But one of the reasons why I've held back turning over this document to all of you is because you needed all of the things that happened before today. All of the foundational principles, all of the business acceleration, and now you're ready to wrap your entire business on a nice schedule so it really launches and it really becomes a business that starts to run itself. And if you think you already have a business that is running itself, this will take you to a whole new level.
Yeah, and when we talk about an annual company meeting schedule, we're talking about daily meetings, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, semi-annual meetings, and then annual meetings. So it's literally saying for the year, here is every meeting that this company is going to have. You'll see with the implementation guides that come with this that it's all laid out for you. So as always, the just add water promise applies here for the program. It's really well done. I know this is a refined process over time. But the first question, Rick, is how do employees typically respond to this? Do they say, this is too much meeting time, it gets in my way, or do they embrace it, or how do you present this?
All right. There's two types of employees. There's the ones that have been with you for a while and they're used to your processes and the way that the company is currently run. Notice I said the way that the company is currently run as opposed to the way you're running the company, because hopefully by now at this point in the process you're not Superman or Superwoman. But in any case, the two types of employees are those that are there, and the second type is new employees that come on board and you're indoctrinating them into the process from day one. And so how do they take to this? Well, it depends. Are they new or are they old? If they've been around for a while, they're going to resist the process. The truth is, this is a very freeing format. You recall the quote that I love using, that only when the rules and structure are clearly defined can creativity flourish. And this is an example of that. This meeting schedule is not onerous in any way. In my company, from Tuesday through Friday in the morning, we have a 15-minute meeting to get everybody on the same page. On Monday, we have an hour-long meeting to get everybody on the same page. And then you have, obviously, monthly and quarterly meetings and annual and biannual meetings, which we're going to run through. But the fact is, this becomes the heartbeat upon which the entire organization functions. So rather than saying how do employees embrace this, I would say how could employees live without this? And once people get on board, it is insane how quickly your culture can change.
And I think the theme here is the heartbeat theme. You know, my wife has picked up on that because you use that descriptor very often, where the idea of a heartbeat in a business that just keeps ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. Everything happens in this kind of life-giving rhythm. That's really the right context to orient, I believe, everybody with. So the idea that this is going to be something that's kind of a waste of time or something that's onerous or something that's distracting them, this is the opposite of that. This is the thing that's going to pull it all together, that's going to rhythmically keep pushing everything in the right direction, that's going to prevent distraction, all those types of things. So I think the why behind this should be really well established, number one, in your own mind, and number two, in the minds of your employees, that there's an important why here, and that this is something that separates you and makes you better than most other businesses when you compare yourself to the outside world. So why don't we go in, Rick, and actually talk about each of the types of meetings, starting with the daily meeting.
I want to preface what you just said, Pat, by first mentioning Vern Harnish, who wrote a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And the seeds of this chart came out of that book for me. And Vern's an old friend, and he has studied businesses and what separates successful ones from ones that aren't successful. And he went all the way back to John D. Rockefeller. How did this man take a small two-person company and create one of the largest industrial companies in the world? And a lot of it had to do with the habits baked into the culture. So after reading and studying Vern's work, we culminated it in this chart. But if you really want to take a much deeper dive, read Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and it's on the bottom of the implementation guide. All right, so let's get back to your question. The daily meetings, what you want to establish with employees is when they come to work, in the morning preferably, and you could also choose an odd hour. You could say, we're going to start at 11 a.m., on the East Coast. If you have a national company, which would be 8:11 a.m. on the West Coast. Or if you want to do what a lot of companies do, and they really do it first thing, and they have everybody call in, they have a weird time, 6:19 a.m. or something like that. So it's much easier to get compliance if you have an odd time to start. But what do you want to do on a daily meeting? I'm talking about a regular daily meeting. In our case, it's 15 minutes. You basically want to say, here are the 5 things that I need to get done today. And those 5 things align with what you need to get done for the week, which aligns with what you need to get done for the month and the quarter and the year. All of it's aligned. But if you can imagine your executive team, let's say you have an executive team of 7 people. It's a Tuesday morning. You want to get as many people in person as possible, and you want to pull up your top 5 sheets and just rattle through them. And you just want to say, what are the 5 things I need to get done today? And what we do here is we just click through them. We actually we have some off-site people, so we will have some people live in the office, and we're all looking at the same computer as those off-site. And our number one objective is to get clarity on what needs to happen that day. So here's what happens in that meeting, which is unbelievable. When I say the 5 most important things I need to get done today, and others are listening, sometimes I'll hear, well, I've already done that. I did that yesterday. Or you don't have to do that anymore. Do it next week. And what it does is it eliminates so much back and forth emailing and follow-up and everything else. So imagine, if you will, your employees getting together. I'm talking about your management team first. And each one of you go through the top 5 things that you need to get done today, 15 minutes. Then, I don't know how many employees you have, but you want it to go down into your organization, so each manager would then meet with their team and have a quick top 5 meeting in which the manager would say their 5 objectives and each employee would say theirs. This obviously cannot be a big meeting. You want people to be in smaller teams of, I would say, a maximum of 8 people. So at the highest level, you want to talk about what you need to get done for the day. Other things that you can do at these meetings are reaffirm maybe the value of the week or the value of the month. You can reaffirm the theme for the quarter or the theme for the week if you want to have weekly themes. You can reaffirm something positive that's happening in the business. Maybe you pick a person of the day, whoever did something great the day before. So you can get wild and crazy with what you do in your daily meetings.
And the objective here, what you're looking to get as a result is clarity and identifying obstacles on a daily basis, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you want, at the end, we wrap up by saying, are there any obstacles that, people are experiencing with their objectives? And oftentimes you'll hear, yeah, I mean, I can't get this done because the printer broke. And you'll uncover very simple fixes to issues that you're having in the office or in the business. So we generally wrap up with, are there any obstacles? Yep.
And these are kind of quick hits. They're 15 minutes. You get in, you touch the bases, and then you move on. Everybody gets into work.
It's very important that you, as the leader of the meeting or whoever you delegate to lead the meeting, they say, take that offline. The purpose of the meeting is to be a heartbeat. And I've seen this happen too often where people take this meeting and it turns into an hour. We cut it off at 15 minutes 100% of the time. There are things that will come up that you need to take offline, or there are things that will come up that aren't meant for a daily meeting. So be very careful about that and be vigilant and diligent in making sure that you're, at the beginning, there might be more of your influence, but over time, you want this to be an automatic company function, just like a heartbeat.
And, I think it's probably critical to observe something you just said, is that whoever's leading the meeting needs to definitely set the boundaries, because it's 15 minutes, and there's very often in organizations these type of people who just want to talk, want to express, want to run away and monopolize the meeting time, etc. And suddenly these meetings can start to creep where they become 20 minutes and 25 minutes, and they start to get off track. So, would you say the discipline of sticking to the time schedule is critical?
Absolutely. And who do you think is the person that violates that discipline more than anyone else?
The leader.
The leader.
They got so much they want to say.
Yeah. How the organization goes is normally how the leader goes. And so if you're leading with discipline and vigilance, your employees and your executive team will do the same. So make sure you're aware of that. Let's jump in now to the weekly meeting. So you've got the daily meeting and you have the weekly meeting. Now, if you look at the chart, you can put whatever you want here. The intention of this is to be a template for you to do whatever you want. On the chart we have here, you'll see 8 a.m. each Monday, content, weekly numbers, obstacles, good news. In a prior module, we got deeper into this topic, but what I want to do here, for those that have grown and they have larger entities now, what we need is a templatized way to communicate this to the entire organization. So put whatever you want on here as it relates to what you want to get done on a weekly basis. But from a high level, you want to reaffirm your quarterly objectives, and you want to set weekly objectives. So what I often do is on a Friday afternoon, I'll sit down, I'll look at my quarterly and monthly objectives, and I'll decide, what do I need to get done next week? And I'll just put 5 things down that I need to get done next week. So I didn't do anything with my dailies. I just put 5 things down. Then I can ruminate over it on the weekend. So Monday morning when I sit down, I could add my 5 daily things. So that's the purpose of the weekly meetings. You could do whatever you want with it, but the key here is you do not want it to be more than 1 hour.
One of the things I want to observe here is that the weekly meeting supplants the daily meeting that day, meaning that it's not like you have 5 daily meetings and a weekly meeting in addition. It is you start the week with the weekly meeting, and then you follow up with 5 short daily meetings.
I want to put all of this in perspective. By this point in the program, you're in year 3, on module 28, and my assumption and Patrick's assumption is that you want to build an enduring company. A lot of people hear this. If we present it to them too early, they say, oh, that's too much work. I can't do that. And then you go and you look at companies that, I think the largest revenue company on earth by this point in time is Walmart. And I recently saw that they were way north of $300 billion in annual revenue, and maybe even $400 billion at this point. And one of the things that Sam Walton did when he founded the company day one is he said, if you want to work for Walmart, one of the things that you have to do is come to a weekly team meeting. And the higher up you go in that organization, the longer those meetings are. And he always associated the weekly heartbeat rhythm of Walmart. The more they did it, and the longer those meetings were, ironically, obviously you can't have them to be more than a day a week. But for managers, I think it is a full day a week. But the longer they were, and the more it became a heartbeat and fabric of the company, the larger and faster the company grew. And by now, it's legend. I mean, all of you know about, or you should know about, Walmart's culture. And it's all based around the heartbeat and the rhythm. The other thing I wanted to say about that is, at a certain point, you've embraced the doorman, you've embraced Superman, you've embraced the toleration tendency, and by now you should be at a point where you want to delegate all of this stuff to others. And the only way to do that is to create an ironclad template for the company to follow. So if you're on the beach in my favorite place is the Italian Riviera. If you're over there, you don't have to call in. Your company's doing it. They know what.
Don't I have pictures of you there in a Speedo?
I couldn't believe that when I went to your office and you actually had that picture of me on your computer.
Yeah, it's quite a sight. I need to laugh every morning. So now I have a question about this, because I think some of the sentiments or a trap that small companies, entrepreneurial companies might fall into, or call a small professional practice or a startup or something like that, is that, well, it's only me and one or two other people, so maybe we don't have to do it because we're so small. We're kind of in communication all day. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody started small, but when you start small, it's easier to incorporate this rhythm. And that's when discipline really shines through and becomes incredibly important. If it's you and one other person, you better be doing this, because it's so ironic. I recently had run into the accountability partner of a good friend of mine at a social function. And, we've been friends a long time, and I asked her, I don't want to say her name, she listens to these modules, but I said, what's going on? And she said, everything's going well, but we don't meet anymore. And I said, why not? She goes, well, ever since we sold the division, it's just me and him, and it's just me and him. And I go, well, how do you feel about that? She goes, I hate it. I'm thinking about leaving. And so it becomes more important the smaller you are, because the bottom line is, the bigger you are, you kind of have these rhythms baked in, but it's important either way. Let's put it that way. If you're big and there's baked in rhythms, it's very important that everybody gets on the same page, so you need to do this. If you're small and you don't have the baked in rhythms, you need to create them, and that's the only way you're going to grow from small to big. And the fact of the matter is, if you're this far into the program, you clearly want that. And I had a note in front of me to remind myself to say this. And that is, I really, really appreciate, and I know you do, Patrick, as well, the feedback that we've been getting on this 30 to 45 minute MP3 recording. We needed to have the videos years 1 and years 2, and I would never change that. And now what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the values and inspiration and content and making it more portable for you. If you have any feedback on these modules, absolutely go to the website, find the Contact Us page, and send an email in so we can get your feedback. We love receiving it. I wanted to make that public service announcement in the middle of the module.
And I'll echo that. The feedback has helped guide the process toward what people are experiencing out there. So your feedback matters.
All right. So now we know what the weekly meeting is. We know now, or we're going to jump to now, the monthly meeting. The monthly meeting for us is a way for us to reevaluate and course correct on our quarterly objectives. So often, many of you will pick your quarterly objectives. You'll get really excited about your quarterly objectives, and then 2 weeks into the quarter, a crisis happens, or you realize you picked the wrong objectives, or everybody starts focusing on something else. It's incredibly important that you have this heartbeat where daily, weekly, and monthly, you're reviewing those quarterly objectives. So on a monthly basis, you want to say, okay, where are we on our quarterly objectives? And you put new monthly objectives. If you go back to that top 5 sheet, which I'm actually going to include in this module so you could see it, so you don't have to go back to the beginning, you could see there's a space for it. Annual company objectives, quarterly company objectives, monthly company objectives, weekly company objectives, daily company objectives. And it looks onerous at the beginning, but it's really not. It depends if you're willing to fill this out, because once you are, then it becomes a heartbeat, and you're really just updating it on a daily basis. But on a monthly basis, we are reviewing our quarterlies, and we're picking new monthly objectives. If it's the beginning of a quarter, obviously you have to create new quarterly objectives. And so this doesn't become hard work. What do? You don't want it to become hard work. So you go to your annual goals. At the beginning of the year, you should have created a long list of 10 annual objectives that you want the company to achieve. So pick 5 of those objectives and create a quarterly objective that aligns with that annual objective. So to simplify this a ton, let's say, and I don't like to use goals like this, but I want to do this for oversimplification. Let's say your objective is to do $10 million in revenue as an annual objective. Well, on a quarterly basis, your goal could be to do $2.5 million in revenue. Now, I don't like revenue-based goals, but I used it as an example. Could be if you want to write a book, and the book has 12 chapters, your quarterly objective could be to write 3 chapters. So you get the idea here. You want your quarterly objectives to align with your annual objectives.
I think a part of the monthly meeting also is to address, as you kind of cited, entropy. Is that, you start to kind of fade on goals, distraction starts to set in, like you said, a crisis hits, and next thing you know, urgency shows up, and you forget about what the particular objectives are. So the monthly check-in is very important, and I think in part, because if you're managing by objectives, which you should all have as a part of your culture now, it's really important, I think, on the monthly basis to say, hey, we got these quarterly objectives, our bonuses, are attached to these objectives. Let's get refocused, let's get re-energized, let's get remotivated, who needs help on the team. All those types of things can come up in that realm. So I think that the idea of a monthly refocus, and that's really the theme of the monthly meeting, is to refocus back to the objectives. I think that goes a long way in making sure that these objectives get hit.
Yeah, and one thing that you can do, everybody does this at a certain size. I would encourage you to do it even if you're tiny, and that is have a company meeting czar. And it's part of their job responsibility to make sure that this heartbeat happens, and it's not you. You as the entrepreneur, you're the one that's the most distracted. You're the one that has opportunities come to you. You're the one that is probably out of the office more than anybody else. So assign this role to somebody. So my question to you right now as you're listening is, who could own the responsibility of making sure that this company meeting schedule is embedded into your culture, and it's on everybody's calendar, and it's happening, and when the meetings are going on, they're the ones that are making sure that from an electronic perspective, everybody can see the top 5 sheets and all of that. So, we're past the point of, pointing fingers and blaming and all that. Let's put this stuff on the ground. This stuff works. You're this far in. Make it work. It's funny when I talk to many of you, you call me and you say, it's just not happening for me anymore in the program. I listen to the modules and I say, well, are you doing the implementation guides? Well, I kind of got out of that habit. Well, you all know that's nonsense. So let's implement this immediately.
So next we start with the quarterly meetings now. So you can see that this is ratcheting up time-wise. So what's the result you're looking for with a quarterly meeting?
Quarterly meetings, in my opinion, are the most important meeting because what happens in a quarterly meeting is you want to pick a theme for the next quarter. You want to lock down your objectives, both personally and for the company, and then you want to communicate this to the whole organization. They're really important because everybody knows that the leadership team is meeting. Everybody's excited to find out what the objectives are and how they're going to be bonused. So there's a lot of excitement around the quarterly meetings once you get into a rhythm. And you've heard me say this before, but it's going to take you about 9 months to really have this work inside your organization. So what happens so often is people do this, or they do an aspect of it, or they do the bare minimum of it, and then they wonder why they're getting some results, but nowhere near the tripling of revenue that I'm hearing from people that are really implementing all the stuff we're teaching and putting the main ones in place quickly. So as it relates to the quarterly meeting, what you want to have is you want to end that meeting with the results that you see when you look at the tool that we sent to you, which is an Excel spreadsheet. I'm also going to send it to you in a PDF. But you got your objectives and theme for next quarter. And then you have your who, what, when. Who has to do what, when. And you get all of that laid out. When you're in a meeting, it's worth repeating. Most of the time, we are in business meetings, and nobody knows what the intent of the meeting is, and nobody knows what the accountabilities are when the meeting is over. When you're on the phone with somebody or you're in a meeting with somebody, what I think is incredibly important, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but the more successful someone is, and I'm going to put the word successful in quotations because that's arbitrary to a certain degree, but the higher level somebody is, the more when you're on the phone with somebody, they start with something like this. Just to be clear, let's lay out the intent of this call. Or just to be clear, let's lay out the intent of this meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, you go over what the to-dos were. So who's going to do what when? And a to-do always has a timeline on it. So I would encourage you on all of these meetings, if there are any to-dos, to make sure that you capture them. And especially on the monthly, quarterly, and annuals, set the intent of the meeting. On the dailies and weeklies, you already know what it is, but you have to set the intent so people know, here's what we're going to do, and then at the end, who, what, when, that's what that means. And I would encourage you to do that for any meeting. I get in trouble with my wife, Pat, as you know, when I do that with our meetings. But I'm like, honey, she goes, you don't have to bring business home. I'm like, well, we've got to get that project done, so who's going to do what when? And so
it's called accountability.
Accountability.
What this whole thing is about. So, and again, the quarterly meetings are on site, and these run an hour and a half, again, which is a tight timeline, which means you don't really have much room for wandering around. You got to really stick to, the intent of the meeting and stay focused, because an hour and a half is not a lot of time to get this stuff done.
Yeah. You need to, in my opinion, make the rhythm of this more important than anything else. People have said to me over and over, but we've got a lot of other issues to deal with, and we can't get it done in an hour and a half. And I say, well, then have a war room. There are other tools in this program that you could use for that. This schedule is more about getting a heartbeat in your organization than it's about getting every single issue talked about and discussed. So I think it's important to note.
Absolutely. So, so all the meetings up till now have been on site. Now we want to talk about the annual and semi-annual meetings, which you recommend they should be off-site.
They should be off-site. The bigger your company is, the longer they could be. I have friends and acquaintances and partners that have all-day and sometimes two-day meetings once a year, or on their semi-annual meeting, which they do obviously mid-year to plan for the second half of the year. They'll do that for at least a day. The way we operate, we've been doing this so long, is we have a 4 to 6 hour meeting for both the semi-annual and the annual. And you want that meeting to occur sometime in the month right before July. So you have to break in the month right before January. So you want to break your year up into two halves. Obviously, half number one is January through June. Half number two is July through December. And you want to make sure you have a semi-annual meeting in the month prior so you could plan those next 6 months. It's kind of the same thing, but again, we've given you a template for you to write in what you want to get done. What we've written in here is a high level. It says content, and it's the bottom of the page. Content, progress, and review for year. Result, get all on the same page. Focus for next year. So very simple. That's what we want to get done. But there's a lot of other things to talk about. You could reaffirm your values. You could go and look at your 10-year vision for the business. You could review customer emails. We have some time where we review customer interactions. One of the things that I started doing a few years ago in businesses is I want to touch the people at the front lines of the business, whether they're the salespeople or whether they're the people calling in, the customers. So as it relates to this program, Patrick, as you know, because we were talking about it recently, once a week I get on the phone during the orientation calls for people that are brand new in the program, and I want to hear what they're saying, what they're hearing about the program, why they joined, and it's given me a huge perspective. So when you have those types of conversations with people, you could then bring them into meetings and say, listen, I talked to 10 customers, or I talked to 10 frontline salespeople, and here's what I learned. So you could do a lot of different things in a longer format meeting. You could review marketing. You can, so it's, we're going to leave this part up to you. The purpose of this module is really, as we said at the beginning, to create a wrapper for you, to wrap all of the functions of your company inside of as it relates to meeting schedules.
Rick, do you have any advice for how to write the agenda for the semi-annual or annual meetings? I mean, you kind of talked about it broadly, but should there be a discipline of who sits down and when to create the agenda for those meetings?
Yeah, it's no different than doing a program like this. What you want to do, and what I do, is I have a document on my computer that says annual meeting ideas. And when it comes to me, I just write it in there. And oftentimes I'll have 15 or 20 things to talk about, and I'll reduce it to the essential things. So at a high level, what you want to do, obviously, is planning. You want to plan for next year. You want to review what happened last year. You want to learn from your mistakes. You definitely want to do those at a high level. But all of the other things you do, you have to be inspired at certain points. You could be in the shower, and you could say, you know what? I really want to talk about this at the next meeting with all the staff members. And so keep a parking lot of ideas of things to talk about. But why don't we whet their appetite here a little bit, Patrick? What are some things that you've talked about in annual meetings?
I think a part for me in annual meetings that has been very critical is to really review the catalyzing statement, to get Socratic to a degree with the key players as far as asking them, do you think that our company this past year has honored our catalyzing statement in its actions and in its processes? Then also review, obviously, the objectives that we set, how we did on the objectives. And one of the things I think is very critical is in this objectives review is that if we didn't hit some, to really soberly ask the question why. Not because we want to place blame, but because we want to learn why we would set an objective and not meet it so that we don't do that again. And then what drives me, and I think everybody's a little different as a leader, but what drives me is vision. So I'm really excited about being able in that type of an extended meeting with the team when we're getting to kind of like the higher level views of things. We're not, it's not a 15-minute morning meeting, but it's an annual meeting, let's say. I really like to get refocused on the meeting and re-enroll everybody in the meeting, have them understand the purpose of why we do what we do every day, the impact we need to have on the world, where we're going, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe that helps to set a really good tone for the meeting So I start with those things, and then from that, I think everything else flows.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I think is critical, and again, it's an interactive type of thing, not a dictatorial thing. And it's what I've learned from you through our accountability group, and some of the parameters that you set up for how we function, has been really talking about the theme and setting a theme for the year, so that it's kind of this filter that we start to see, or this lens that we start to see everything through, which I think is a really important element of that particular meeting.
Yeah, I kind of set Patrick up on that last question because we normally prepare in advance, and that question was not on the list. So I thought that was a great answer, having not been prepared. But one of the things you can do as a listener is, and we don't do this enough, but go back and look at all 20 plus prior modules, and you will find a ton of things to talk about in the meeting. Another thing to think about is, as you get good at these principles and putting all this stuff on the ground, a thing that I like to say is you could just move your pinky and you'll start producing leverage results. Once you have all of this baked into your culture, small changes make dramatic differences. And to go back to what Patrick said, when I first got involved in our accountability group, the one that we're on now for going on 5 years, we had taken over another accountability group. One of the members was in a prior group, and it failed. And all we did was put simple, rhythmic things to do every week, and we operated inside of that frame. And then we were free to create the accountability group in the way that we wanted. But if we didn't have the frame, I guarantee you, and you would admit this too, Patrick, our group would have failed. And so,
yep.
Yeah,
we're completely just disassociates. There's just nothing to hold it together. It's it's like, think of a cell without a cell membrane. It just kind of leaks out all over.
That's exactly right. So
it has no form.
So this program and this module specifically is a container, and you have to look at it that way. Don't look at it as, oh, can I do this, or should I do this, or do I have time for this? Assign it to someone, and make sure that you're demonstrating to them, when you're assigning it to them, that it's a container in which your business is going to operate. I mean, we go back to that McDonald's example, or any other company that's radically grown. They all had a container in which they operate. So this is an essential part of your business. We did not introduce this to you earlier because I believed, and Patrick believed, that you needed all of the other modules before it, so that you can now fully appreciate the elegance of this, the simplicity of this. Although it's going to require work, it's a simple and elegant solution to put your business in a nice, neat wrapper or container.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you implement what we've done here and spoken about in this module, you're now talking about a mature business that is so poised for success and next level and everything else that you want to move toward in your career. So this is a big one, and it's not one of these exciting, rah-rah type of modules. Rick and I were talking about this. Hey, this isn't going to be like a glamorous module, but it's one of these structured things. And I love the metaphor you use. It gives a container to put things in that gives such great structure to the business that now you don't just have a bunch of muscles. You got a skeleton, that those muscles are sitting on, so you can flex the muscles. So I really think that that's a great metaphor. Yep. So with that, Rick, any final words before we tie up?
Yeah, I wanted to say a lot of you listen to the audio first and then go back and look at the implementation guide. When you go back and look at it, you'll fully appreciate it. So I don't want you to think you missed anything because you didn't print out the documents first. This is the type of module that you listen to it. It's not too long. You then go look at the implementation guide, which is going to be a simpler implementation guide than normal, because the true work comes when you take the Excel spreadsheet and create your own company meeting schedule. So then once you do that, I want you to go back and re-listen to it, because you'll get a lot of nuanced things. That's another form of feedback I get from people. I was talking to a chiropractor 2 days ago, Patrick. He does $3 million in revenue, And he said he's watched and listened to every module 5 times. I said, that's more than me. That's crazy. But he goes, every time I listen to it, I get another nuanced message. So this is a Just Add Water program. We very, very, very much appreciate your commitment to yourself, to the program. We appreciate you allowing us to be on purpose in our lives. And this program is so on purpose for me. I know it is for you, Patrick. So I just want to thank you for getting this far in.
And I echo those sentiments, and I'll just say thanks for listening to Module 28, Creating an Annual Company Meeting Schedule.
Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.